It's
Ready?
Yep.
Welcome everybody to our weekly Chris Carlsson PPP Forgiveness webinar. It's been a lot of great information. It's always moving, so it's great to get that weekly updates. And after this webinar today, we're going to start doing it on every alternate Wednesday, every second Wednesday. But today, Chris Carlsson with SCORE is going to be going through a lot of information that's going to specifically help you to get through the PPP progress and all that goes along with it and all the changes. So we're going to have, if you have a question, we're not using the chat function, but rather we're going to ask you to go into the Q&A in the bottom and type in your questions. You can ask as many questions as you want. We're going to try to get to everything. And it just helps the flow to go a little bit better as we go along. And if you're new to SCORE, SCORE is a group of volunteers who are mentoring to people to help them start and grow their business. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chris Carlsson. Take it away, Chris.
All right, thank you, Bill. And welcome everybody to this Wednesday seminar we have about the SBA support for small businesses through the EIDL and PPP programs primarily. And a comment on something I sent out earlier in the week or over the weekend is that the EIDL program is still available. Despite somebody had heard that it had been closed down, it has not. What was disbanded because the money ran out was the grant portion of EIDL, the $1,000 or $1,000 per employee. That was a grant in front end of that program. That grant portion doesn't exist anymore, but the loan program itself does still exist, as does the PPP. PPP was extended, as we know, to 8/8 for application. The forgiveness portion, as we know, was extended to 24 weeks. And today, I'm going to specifically go through some thoughts about PPP forgiveness, and I'm short. There is a reason why I'm bringing this up now, and that is that I have gotten several pings by SCORE clients who are either not ramping up yet or are not open yet, but they have had the PPP money for quite a while and are getting squeezed on the 24-week covered period. So I thought what I would do is to actually go through the thought processes that we had in our operations when it was 8 weeks and you got the money and 1 week disappeared and you really had only 7 weeks left to do all this stuff. I dug back in and kind of touched on the thought process that we had back then. Excuse me. So I'm going to share some of those with you. Hence the heading of this seminar, PPP forgiveness. I'm short, what now? So here is that we should not get caught paying money we don't have. And we are in a situation, some people, we got the money too early and revenues are coming too late. And we are running out of covered period, even if it's 24 weeks. However, if we don't start getting revenues until September, we are getting squeezed on covered period. Now, I'm going to have to tell you some disclaimer here that on what I'm saying today, I'm making no ethical, moral judgment on any of this, because this is, I'm presuming that we're talking about a case for survival and kind of aggressive actions. I don't know of any of these. When we went through thought process, what could be done, I don't think that any of them violates regulations, SBA. I know it doesn't violate laws, but I also think that it doesn't violate SBA regulations, but can't guarantee it because we don't know really what they all are. But having said that, let's go forward and have this discussion. And of course, today also, always open for questions and answers. And the whole concept of forgiveness and plan for forgiveness, especially if we're in trouble in terms of getting squeezed of covered period, we're running out of runway. So what do we need to do? We need to fit as many expenses as possible into definition of eligible expenses and into a covered period. That's the whole trick if we are in that squeezed period of time. So eligible expenses, just to do a recap of what eligible expenses are. The first ones are the payroll expenses, and they need to be at least 60% of the calculated forgiveness amount. So if the calculated forgiveness is 100,000, payroll has to be 60,000. If we only get to 60,000 of calculated forgiveness, regardless of what the loan is, then it's only 36,000. Then it's 36,000 that it has to be. So, and that is gross payroll, health insurance, retirement contribution, and I always forget to put in there, which I'm going to do now, and that is state, local payroll taxes. And I always forget them because they're so low. It's not a lot of money typically. So then other eligible expenses cannot be more than 40% of the calculated forgiven amount: rent, mortgage, interest, and utilities. And we can talk about what that is when we get there, especially utilities. There is no real official definition of utility. But that is dependent on what your bank would actually consider as utility. Now, let's talk about the covered period. That is the 8 to 24 weeks in which we count expenses to be forgiven. So if we're trouble getting squeezed, make sure we do the 24. And then we're going to talk about how do we actually elongate this into a larger one. Let's go here first. Let's talk about the covered period expansion. And it's not that easy to do. There are only two ways to do it, really, as far as I know. Anybody else have any ideas on how you can accomplish this? Please share it, give it to me, I'll distribute it. But when we went through the thought process of doing this, when it was capped at 8 weeks, then you look at the covered period starts at the time of funding. However, you do have an option to use an alternate period, covered period start for payroll, and that is when your next payroll period starts. So if you got the money on a Monday, let's say, easier, more people can relate more to that. You got it on a Wednesday, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I can't say but what date that would be. But let's say a Wednesday, April 22nd. I think it's a Wednesday. So if you do bi-weekly payroll period, and that would then start not the following Monday, but Monday after that, you could actually wait 10 days to count the start of the covered period. And that might be able to help you because it now pushes out that whole covered period by 2 weeks at the end, where you may have more payroll to be counted. Number 2, the regulation and the law talks about paid payroll and incurred payroll. So we can start using paid payroll. So if we start 10 days from now and then we start counting the paid payroll at the time, and then we go down till we get to the 24th week, then we have the payroll that is paid in that week. In that last payroll period, we also have incurred payroll. In addition to what was paid, we have an incurred payroll not yet paid, and it depends on how long you have between the end of the payroll period till you pay your people. Varies a lot. Some people are aggressive and they have a week or 10 days. Some states allow 10 days. Some states allow a week between the end of the payroll period and payment. Some people are very generous with the people and go through Friday and pay Monday. Then there is less of an issue. But so you could come to the end of the 24 weeks. And then if you do weekly payroll, you have 1 week, the 24th week, that is going to get paid the following week. The regulation for SBA indicates that you could also count that. And that sounds good. In theory, the issue is that it's hard to get the payroll reporting that actually can do that. Typically, you can say, I'm going to have the payroll reported for this period of time, and you have to choose, it's either paid or incurred. That's typically how payroll reporting works. Now, you often can download the payroll reporting into an Excel. And most lenders would have a problem probably accepting Excel. Then you could convert that to a PDF. And you write a little blurb how you did it, and you date it appropriately for the covered period. You disclose it, and then it's up to them to ask the question. If you produce a payroll report that is 25 weeks, I'm betting that the lender who does the forgiveness application for you is going to kick it out, because they're going to have a machine read it and going to say, too many weeks. It doesn't work. So you're going to have to do it that way. These are the only ways I've seen it. There is one more thing that could do. You could move up payments into the week. There's nothing that I have seen that prohibits you from moving up a payroll. So if you pay on a Friday, if payroll period ends on a Friday, you pay Monday or Tuesday, and your 24-week covered period ends that Friday, you could elect to move up your payroll and pay it on Friday. Could be some slop over, etc. You can work that out with your payroll company. It should work. My controllers went through that thought process with the payroll companies, and they said that they could accommodate that. And you can do that. You can actually pay your payroll in advance. So now, before we go into actually talking about the expenses, because that's the easier part, actually, there is more to do. Let's talk about tracking, because unless you track, you know where you're going to be in advance of getting there. This is very hard to do. You got to kind of see where you are. I made some adjustment to our little happy tracking sheet here. So I'm going to go down here. That doesn't work well. What do I do now? I make it a little. Oh, I can do it that way probably. Okay. So let's say that we get $55,000 in a loan. Just pick that number, a small company, and we are squeezed. We got the money, let's say we got the money on 4/20. 4/20. And our alternate period is 4/27. That's the next payroll period starting. So then 24 weeks takes us to 10/11. Then, however, we sit there and say, my revenues haven't come back. I haven't had payroll really until, I'm not going to have it until mid-August or something. So in effect, I'm going to have maybe 9 or 10 weeks, maybe even less of reduced payroll. How am I going to do this? So here, I am guessing for the purpose of this, that this little operation has about $2,000 of payroll a week. So let's say we get it in, we think we're going to be able to do 2,000 per week for 10 weeks. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think there we are. Okay, and then we have state and local taxes, and they run about 6%, give or take, for us. So we do that. And then we're going to have some other eligible expenses. Let's say that we have $3,000 of rent per month and $1,200 in utilities. So let's see what that means. Let's do that for 24 weeks. So let's say we squeeze it in, make sure we get 6 of them into that period of time. So here, now we've done all of our eligible expenses. We got $55,000 in loan, and now this runs all the way through to the other side here in the easy forgiveness form calculation. So I know I sent this to you, and I'll send it again, and you can do this expense tracker, but you can do it by yourself too. So what does that mean? Well, we got $55,000, and to this point, it looks like I'm only going to have $35,000. I'm going to have to pay back $15,000. Hey, that's no good. I don't know that I'm going to have $15,000 to pay back. So what can I do? There are a couple of things that we can do. Now we know what the bogey is. The bogey is $15,000. I need to find $15,000 of expenses that I would have anyway and get this in here without me paying out more money. And that's not cheating, because this is what we need to do to survive, and we're going to do it in a legal fashion and all that kind of stuff. So first question is, okay, so in the $2,000 a month, a week, in that, did I pay myself? No, because I didn't think I had the money, etc. So, okay, so I can pay myself. Then I can reinvest that into the company and put the money back as an equity investment in a company. I can do that, that's fine. So now I'm assuming that we actually paid me through payroll last year, and then I can do 20%, 20.83% of that payroll from last year. Let's say I paid myself through payroll last year $50,000. That means that I can add $11,416. I think it comes to something like that. Okay, well, I didn't know this, folks. That actually gives us, with the payroll taxes, looked like we are actually coming to 55,000. That didn't add the 15,000, but that's because we added the payroll and we now didn't have to fill up with the other eligible expenses as much. So that's kind of how that works. So by doing that, I end up at $15,000. What you noticed, right? Didn't spend $1 more, maybe the $600 for payroll taxes, and I'm gonna have to pay some income taxes on it too, but it's probably not too bad. So let's say that out of the 11,000, I paid myself. I get to keep 8,000. I take the 8,000, I reinvest it in company's equity, the cash comes back, and we have it all forgiven. That's a good deal. Yes, it is. So this is how that works. We do the projections, we see what the bogey is, and then we'll figure out what it is that we need to do. I know I'm going through this fast. I'm going to send it out again. Feel free to email and all that kind of stuff with questions, and I'm going to try to answer as soon as I can, as fast as I can, etc. But here, as you can see, there are things that can be done. So let's talk a little bit about what some of those are. And as I said, some of this we could actually be talking about survival, and that's why I have the tiger, our aggressive tiger friend. We got to be a tiger about this. So we don't want to pay back what we have. It is supposed to be a gift forgiven. So let's make it that way. So what can we do? Again, concept, create eligible expenses without increasing the cost. That's the concept. So if you haven't paid yourself because you didn't feel like you had the money, go ahead and pay yourself. If you had wages last year, it's maximum 20.83% of 2019 wages up to $20,830 if you're an owner employee. If you're Schedule C, if you're a single member LLC, for example, you have employees, and then your bank probably included a Schedule C amount for you in the, if they helped you go through it, in the actual loan amount. That one should be included, that actual amount should be included. Now, other things that are more easy to see. What could you do? There's nothing to say that you can't hire new employees. There's nothing to say that you can't hire your spouse. You could do that, and you could pay your spouse, take the money and reinvest in the company. That payroll becomes a forgivable expense, and you can reinvest the money in the company and beef up the cash by that same amount. This was actually done at some place when we were at the 8-week type thing, and that was that looked at prepay wages and take it back later. Now, in most states, that would involve a written agreement with the employees, and also making sure that when you take it back, you do it adhering to minimum wage laws and all those kind of things. I had people thinking that they could go and just prepay employees and then take it back. It doesn't work that way. You actually, in most states, you can't just take money back from the employees, even if you gave it to them before. You have to have a written agreement. You don't want to get sued because of it, but it can be done. Not difficult to do a written agreement. Here, Pete, I'll give you an extra $500 here now for hassle pay, and then I'm going to take some of that back later. What you can also do, if you do retirement benefits, if you have a 401k where you do a payment to the employee for that account, you can move that up into the covered period and beef up payroll expenses for that. If you pay your health insurance on the 3rd of every month, so you got 6 of them in here, your portion of the cost, etc., in here, and your covered period would end on the 24th. of October, let's say. Next payment for health insurance is on November 3rd. Well, I haven't seen anything that tells you that you couldn't pay this on the 23rd of October. And if you do, that's now a payment for health insurance within the covered period. You now created an eligible expense inside the covered period that is what you would pay anyway a little bit later, and it's now a forgiven expense. Another thing is that if you have 1099 people that does certain things for you, I know this is risky from other perspective, but again, we're now talking if we're in a position that it's disaster for us if we don't get this forgiven. You could then take a 1099 employee, make them an employee for a period of time and pay them on payroll that you would otherwise pay them as an 1099. That has now created an eligible expense that you have anyway. You could take things that you hire people to do. If you have a cleaning service, for example, let's say that you have to have a cleaning service and you pay, pick it, $1,000 a month for cleaning. You could take a period of time in the covered period and ask your employees, okay, how would you like that I pay you $1,000 extra wages and you clean? Now you have converted a non-eligible expense to an eligible expense. And there are many ways of doing that. I've heard of people who have done it with vendors, done it with competitors. And so they've said to all customers, I say, okay, I can do some more things for you here. Do you need me to do this? And then you pay your employees for do that and you get a revenue stream. And you now converted an extra payroll expense into forgivable, eligible expense. And also what we talked a little bit about before, and that is to move up the pay date. As we said, if your covered period ends on October 24 and you're scheduled to make a payment on the 25th, 26th, 27th, how about you move it up to the 24th and get it inside of that? You got to get your payroll company to do it because you want it in the payroll report and you want to show the bank statement that it was funded on the 24th. So that was a fairly quick rendition of a fairly big issue. And let's see if you have any questions today.
Yes, so there are a few questions, Chris, and let me see here. I'll tell you what we have. Okay, so we have Deborah was asking, can you email the tracker sheet after the webinar?
Yes, we certainly can. And I think since you are on the webinar, we have your email address. And I think what we'll do on this one, we'll actually email the tracker sheet to everybody who is on this email list for the webinars.
Okay. And Diane has asked, what happens if you did not have owner pay last year and you have taken payment during this time? Where does this go on the tracker and application for forgiveness?
Yikes, yikes, yikes. You are capped as an owner employee at 20.83% of last year's pay. And at this point, I don't know of any way to get around that issue. You might be better off hiring your spouse and pay them, because provide that spouse is not an owner of the company, and then take that and put it back in the company and distribute the money to yourself. I don't know a good way of doing that if you already paid yourself. I don't know if there is some provision that we can go back to the first quarter or something. I don't think so. That is not a good thing. That's one of the hardest ones we have. Okay.
And Chris, we also have Diane is asking, can you pay back, let me see, can you pay back to work incentive and have it included for forgiveness?
Yeah, absolutely. It's any payroll. If that is straight payroll, hourly salary, and if it's bonus, and if it is hazard pay, etc. Now, when you do, there is a little trick to look at that. So if you take Pete or Maria and say, Maria, I'm going to pay you a bonus. And let's say Maria makes $80,000 a year. You are now limited to have a bonus in addition to that, so that she gets capped on an annualized basis at $100,000. You can only pay up to an annualized basis of $100,000. That's one thing to look out for. Other than that, yes, payroll is payroll, whether it is commissions, hourly salary, bonus, hazard pay, doesn't matter.
And for the rest of the participants, please go ahead and ask some questions. We have, we do have a little extra time here, and Chris can answer those for you. It almost seems, Chris, like there could be opportunities of getting other people included in your payroll to hit that limit, so that you get it forgiven. Right? That's the whole goal.
And there again, we are in an environment where nobody has a lot of extra money to spend. So what you want to do is to look at that and spend money that you otherwise would spend anyway. If you look out and you say, my covered period ends on October 24th, I'm going to have to do XYZ in the first week of November. Maybe you can move that XYZ up to October and hire somebody to do that in October and get that counted. Or you hire your spouse and pay the money and reinvest back in the company. So yes, nobody can tell you nobody will be able to tell you that you cannot hire people. So absolutely.
And Chris, would you say in addition to family members like your spouse, are there other opportunities to hire additional people to fulfill these rules?
Well, you can hire anybody you want. The trick is that you don't want to spend money that you otherwise wouldn't spend. So you wouldn't hire just to hire. Then you're better off paying the money back over a year or 18 months as it would be. However, if you can hire people and spend it on things you otherwise would spend it on anyway, then yes. So it's also a strategy question of making the cash last longer. If you don't have a cash problem and all that kind of stuff, sure, go ahead. You can spend it on anybody you want to.
Okay. And Chris, Deborah has written, what falls under eligible 40%? Can you review the list of what's eligible?
Yep. Let's go back here. Let's see, I think I have it somewhere. Here, it is eligible for the 40% is rent, mortgage, interest, and utilities. Utilities will end up being what your lender will allow you to do in the PPP forgiveness application. And you want to get 100% forgiveness, so to plan, make sure that it is in there. What I have seen that is not a problem. It's the typical utilities, gas, electric, water. Then also phones. I would include cell phones. I would include internet expenses. I would not, as some people have asked, I wouldn't include web pages and all that kind of stuff. That's not utilities under anybody's trying to define it that way. You risk then getting kicked out, and then you lose that money when you could have other eligible expenses go in. So that's what it is. It's rent, mortgage interests, the interest, and utilities. And the mortgage interest, that and in rent, I would include leases of equipment leases that you have in that, and also interest on loans that you might have for equipment, on term loans that you have. So it's not necessarily just the building.
Yeah, so your equipment and things that support your business.
Yeah. Anything that's considered a mortgage payment and term loan payment, the interest portion of it.
Okay, that's for questions for now. So keep the questions coming in. We just want to break in with that, and you can, there is another. Somebody's just saying thank you. Deborah's saying thank you. You're welcome, Deborah.
Pleasure, Deborah. Absolutely. Well, if there is nothing more, I don't mind. I'll be cutting off. We don't want to sit and people just hang for no reason at all. And by all means, folks, write an email with questions. I'll be happy to answer questions when I get a chance. Usually I do it fairly quickly, because most of the times it's something that fairly quickly can be answered. If it's more involved, I try to do it within 24 hours. Sometimes I fail, but I try.
Okay. And for this weekly webinars that we've been having with Chris, and it's always important because things change so much, and Chris does a great job of keeping up to date. However, we're going to skip next Wednesday. We're going to make this every other Wednesday. So you'll get an announcement ahead of time, but it won't be 1 week from today. It'll be 2 weeks from today will be the next one. And during the course of that time, if you come up with questions, just jot them down. And when we start there, you can ask them as part of the webinar, or you could just reach out to SCORE itself.
Yeah. You can write an email either to me directly or to the Monmouth SCORE email that you would have on the website. That goes to a couple of people. I get them. I'll see if it's a question related to something that we've talked about, then I'll pick up and answer it.
And I also want to mention, in addition to Chris's webinars he's been having on each Wednesday, we also have a Friday weekly webinar, and that's different topics. Chris is doing really has a lane of PPP and EIDL and SBA and forgiveness and all that. The Friday ones vary a little bit, and this Friday we have a webinar at 11 a.m. and it's actually one of our SCORE mentors, Elizabeth Holmes, is going to be speaking, and it's about managing the differences in the workplace. And I think right now is a perfect time to consider attending that webinar, because there are a lot of things going on, and knowing how to handle things and emotions and all that. And that'll be this Friday at 11 a.m. So by all means, you can attend that and invite whoever you like with that. And to summarize, so SCORE here in Monmouth has about 40 mentors. These are either business owners or retired business owners who are volunteer their time and expertise to help you to grow your business and start your business. And we have a whole bunch of different mentors. We have some that are accountants, some that are lawyers, some that are marketing. So if you have any interest in getting this, it's totally and always free. There's never ever any cost. We're funded by the SBA, and our job is just to help people to do better. So it's a free service, and I wish I would have known about this earlier when I started my business, but you have mentors who go alongside with you. It's always confidential. It could really help you to get to the next level, or even now can help you get through what so many businesses are going through now. So you can feel free to request a mentor. And if you have any topics that you'd like us to discuss, it's all about you. We're trying to provide content and topics that generate with you. So if you have any questions or any topics that you'd like to see covered, go ahead and just email us over and we'll consider that, because we do have our weekly Friday webinars going on in addition to Chris's now every other Wednesday. So anything else, Chris?
I think that does it for now. And we will again later on, when we know that it's going to be more of a crunch time, when we get to September, October, pick up on this topic again.
And we can always change it if need be. I mean, Chris is going to be doing every alternate Wednesday if that's a change. But if need be, and if if Chris feels that we can go back to, if something comes up, we can always add that weekly one if need be. But in the meantime, write down any questions that you have. Please ask us. We have a bunch of mentors ready to help you. And now, since we do everything right now in the virtual world, and it's all confidential, I think it can really help your business and just solve some questions. Sometimes you just need to have somebody who's going to give you the answer that's best suiting you.
Yep. And
so with that, we'd like to, I'm sorry, Chris?
I wonder a little bit how we do mentoring now. Most of the mentoring these days is done through Zoom, actually, one-on-one and through Zoom.
Yeah, so with the Zoom, formerly we used to normally meet at a business, at a location, at a library. Right now with Zoom, we can meet really anywhere because we're all virtual. And when you request a mentor, if you have one mentor and you need additional help, like say if you needed sales and marketing, you find out you needed maybe some legal one, we have other mentors who could co-mentor along with you to help. So whatever your needs are, we have mentors. We have mentors all throughout the country. And again, we're funded by the SBA, so it's totally free to you. And that's just one of the benefits of SCORE Monmouth. So with that, I'd like to wish everybody enjoy the nice weather that we have coming up ahead. It's going to be some warm ones. And we will see you for Chris's webinar 2 weeks from today. And our next webinar will be our weekly Friday webinar, 11 a.m. And that'll be Elizabeth Holmes. And I think it's going to be one that you should try to get to. Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for attending and just reach out to SCORE if we could be of any help.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.